I will analyze Araki's art style in Stardust Crusaders. It's mostly the same throughout, so there will be no different eras. As usual, I'll start with facial thirds. Although it varies slightly, the trend is that the upper third is the shortest, the middle third is in the middle, and the bottom third is the longest. This results in hyper-masculine faces with small foreheads and long jaws. The outline for the eyes is thick, top and bottom. The top line is straight with diagonal lines dropping from both sides. For Dio, who has a sharp tareme eye, he has a rhombus shape that only slants down on the inside, close to the nose, and not on the outside, close to the ear. The bottom of the main eye is drawn curved like a U or sharp like a V. This results in the eye outline having the shape of an upside-down pentagon that has been stretched wide. Sometimes the bottom line is flat too, creating a widened hexagon shape. Both male and female have extra eyelashes to their outline. The eyeball is drawn like a circle, but it can be widened for an oval look. There's a pupil in the center, a couple circular highlights, and some radial lines around the pupil. The eyelid traces the shape of the top eye line. The eye gap is about 1 eye max. It is often slightly less than 1. All their eyebrows are very thick. Araki has 2 methods for drawing the nose in part 3. The first is the detailed way. The 2 nostrils are drawn and the whole underside of the nose is covered in hatching, creating a heart shape. There is a line down from the center of this heart, splitting the nose in half. Sometimes half of the heart is colored black. Sometimes there is extra black shadow dropping from the heart. The bridge of the nose is outlined in 1 or 2 lines, going from the heart up to the brow. These can be straight or hatched lines. The simplified way, which seems to develop towards the end, keeps the bridge, but the heart shape is reduced to a thick black V shape. There are other shading details, but I'll cover them when I get to that section. For the mouth, Araki likes to draw an M shape. The style has both an upper lip and lower lip drawn. The upper lip follows the same M shape as the main mouth, while the lower lip is more of a straight line that turns up at the edges. Both of these lips are thick for manga and anime standards. The bottom lip is thicker than the upper lip. The jaws are long due to the length of the lower thirds. They have a mostly realistic shape with triangular jaws and flat chins. Araki likes to include a cleft chin with a little hook shape. For female faces, the most noticeable difference is the lack of extra face shading, which I'll talk about later. Their lower thirds are a little shorter, their chins are rounder, and their eyebrows are thinner and wilder, and they have more eyelashes more frequently when you look closely. Obvious traits that artists would use for female faces, like eyelashes and big lips, are given to males too, making the distinction smaller, but the men don't look feminine due to the extremely masculine traits, like a strong jaw and thick eyebrows. The hair is drawn very detailed. Characters with white hair have many small lines inside. Black hair is drawn with brush-like tools, creating wild hair that goes in many directions and jagged highlights. For height, the characters are at least 8 heads tall, which is the average male, or more. Both Jotaro and Dio are 6'5". Jojo is often around 9 heads tall. The line weight is medium to thick for outlines and thin for hatching. The anatomy of characters is mostly realistic, apart from the stylized details that I'll cover next. Jojo earns a lot of style points for the amount of unique and abstract things it does in its art style. The first trait I'll start with is the geometric bodies that some people describe as looking like bionicles. Rather than bodies having organic curves and smooth forms, Araki chooses to add in hard and sharp edges to some parts of the body in a geometric way that is reminiscent of bionicles. Look at Jotaro's shoulder. It looks like a short cylinder that has been turned on its side, like a wheel. Look at his pectoral muscles. They look like a chess piece placed on top of the chest. The characters didn't always look this geometric, especially at the start. Jotaro's first appearance still had his unique chest, but his shoulders are normal. Next is shading. Araki uses nearly every comic trick in the book: hatching, cross-hatching, feathering, solid black, and screen tone. His preference is hatching and cross-hatching. There are some parts of the body that are shaded consistently. I covered the nose and mouth before, but there's more around the nose. This is probably the most iconic part of Araki's style. Towards the middle of the nose bridge, there are vertical hatching lines on the front plane. The side planes of the bridge are usually left empty, while extra hatching outlines them. It goes from the inner corner of the eye down to the nose's heart shape. This massive shading often goes across the underside of the eye and then drops down to the cheek, creating a frontal plane and a side plane of the face. On the outside of the eye, the side closest to the ear, there are slanted hatching lines connecting the eye to the eyebrow. That's about it for consistent shading. Everything else can change. On the forehead, mostly when characters frown, there is a varying amount of hatching and cross-hatching. Sometimes there's hatching on the chin. Under the chin, there can be hatching, cross-hatching, or solid black shading. In general, Araki seems to make up his own shading rules. There will be little areas of shading in random places that have nothing to do with the light source, but it adds detail and texture. Hands, necks, clothes, anywhere. Star Platinum and the World are great examples to see how crazy the shading can get. Sometimes the random shading will create a more geometric shape for the form. The thickness of those lines can also get thicker sometimes. The way the folds are drawn are also stylized. They are very excessive, exaggerated, and unrealistic. Real clothes don't fold as much as they do here. It is especially noticeable towards the start and it cools down towards the end, but it still exists. Look at Jojo's sleeve as he first moves through stop time. The way the sleeve distorts doesn't physically make sense, but the style comes together so well that you won't notice unless you stop to look for it. Sometimes the folds add to the geometric forms of the characters. For solid black forms, like Jojo's hair or jacket, they are never pure black. There's always some kind of highlight within them. The highlights in the hair and clothes are very messy. The hair follicles shoot out in different directions and look like they were drawn with brush strokes. The clothes have complicated folds that lead to more complicated shading. The black transitions into light through hatching, cross-hatching, and feathering. Sometimes Araki colors the white parts of the black forms with screen tones, but not often. This was mostly in the beginning, like in JoJo vs Kakyoin. Sometimes, the poses in JoJo are awkward, almost like they were made using an action figure as a reference rather than a real person. Sometimes, the poses are just stiff in a way that humans wouldn't be. Other times, the anatomy doesn't make perfect sense. Here are a few examples. Jotaro's hand when he shoots himself in the head. A lot of scenes where Jotaro and Dio are flying. In the panel of Dio stopping time, both look awkward. Dio's pose looks like one an action figure would make, not a human. And then Jotaro's foot is at a seemingly impossible angle based on the angle of his head. When Jotaro gets stabbed by knives, his right hand fingers are in a strange position. I believe the reason Araki can get away with this is because he's, seemingly, intentionally put characters in strange poses in the past. Poses so bizarre that they have their own name, JoJo poses. Another idiosyncrasy from this style is the avoidance of mugshots, or characters facing perfectly forward. They are usually turned to the side a little. Another stylistic choice is the way the heads are drawn when they are tilted upward. Realistically, the jawline would appear to flatten and only start to curve upward when the angle is extreme. But in JoJo, at the slightest upward tilt, the chin will start curving. From what I remember, it never flattens and always uses this method. That's it for my analysis of Part 3's art style. It is the most unique art style I've covered so far, but it still looks really good. The characters have macho masculine faces. The style uses every comic shading under the sun and is very liberal with its use of it, putting it in places that don't always make sense, but still work. He even has his own unique formula for cross-hatching on the face. It's so iconic that once an artist uses it, I know exactly what they're referencing. The folds are as wild as the hatching. The bodies have some geometric bionicle feel to them, and the poses feel like action figures. Out of all of JoJo's art, this is easily my favorite style.